Tonight, we travel together thousands of years to the banks of the Nile River. We journey to a civilization known for its pyramids, pharaohs, and gods that watched your every move. It is a civilization that, from a distance, appears as a golden dream, a glittering image of eternity and power. But behind the golden masks and towering temples lies a harsher reality, a reality of mud, sweat, and blood. Today, we ask a deeper question. What would have happened if you were destined to live for one day in ancient Egypt? Let me tell you in advance that the burning sun was not the only danger that threatened you. And now I invite you to dim the lights and let us begin our journey together in the sands of time. Welcome to ancient Egypt, the land of pyramids, gods, and the constant violence of ultraviolet rays. Before you even open your eyes, the sun has already invaded your reed hut like a cruel celestial god auditioning for a starring role. No curtains, no shades, and certainly no air conditioners. There is only the bare desert heat that bakes everything, including you, at breakfast time. The air itself shimmers with heat, making distant landscapes look like a dancing mirage. You are lying on a straw mat, covered with a linen sheet that is more of a suggestion of protection than actual protection. As for the Nile breeze you were promised in all the documentaries, it probably vanished around 2800 BC. Shade is a luxury you do not have, as trees are scarce, and hiding behind a mud wall only gives you temporary relief, as the wall itself soon begins to sweat, radiating extra heat. As you stumble out of the hut, the temperature has already approached 32 degrees Celsius, and it is not even mid-morning yet. The sun in ancient Egypt does not just rise, it attacks. Your linen tunic? It is useless, more like a paper towel in a sauna room. And do not even think about sunscreen. Your best option is to cover your body with mud or with crocodile droppings, which might prevent you from turning into a human torch, with emphasis on the word might. And if you feel like you are melting from the heat, consider it a spiritual compliment. The hotter it gets, the more powerful the god Ra becomes. After you finally get up from your prickly mat, there is good news and bad news. The good news is that the Nile is only a few steps away. The bad news is that you will smell it before you see it. Yes, the great Nile, the giver of life. But let's be honest, its smell is pungent, an unpleasant mixture of the scent of fish and the dampness of swamps. The annual flooding of the Nile is what makes life possible, but this flood itself was a double-edged sword. If the flood came low, famine would ensue. If it came too high, it would destroy villages and sweep away souls. Your whole life was at the mercy of this fickle river. And yet, this is your bathing place. Soap has not been invented yet. Instead, you use the latest cleaning technology of that era, sand. Yes, Egyptian-style skin exfoliation. Scrub your body with coarse grains of sand and consider it a form of skincare. It is like nature's sandpaper, but less effective. And while you are busy with that, you have to pray silently that a hungry crocodile does not mistake you for its next meal. Crocodiles and hippos were not just animals. They were the cruel masters of the river who did not hesitate to pull any creature into the depths. Not to mention the sewage that occasionally comes with the river's flow. Humans, livestock, and funeral boats all share this river. And despite everything, this water was considered clean. In short, the Nile is indeed sacred. It feeds you, cleans you, and quenches your thirst. But it is also part miracle and part biological hazard, and it was all you had. And now, let's move on to your permanent roommates, insects and pests. Flies are not just a heavy guest, they are your partner in every meal, and your companion in every breath you take. Armies of flies swarm around you, around your food, and settle on your children's eyelids. As for the mosquitoes that breed on the banks of the Nile, they do not just transmit annoyance, but they also transmit fever and death. And at night, you have to beware of scorpions looking for warmth in your shoes or your bed, as one sting from them is enough to end your day and your life. Your life was a constant battle against small, merciless enemies who never sleep and can never be defeated. As for your dwelling, the one you call home, it is a structure of mud brick walls and a roof of palm fronds. No glass windows, but small openings that allow some light in, and a lot of dust and flies. The floor is packed earth, and the furniture consists of a mat for sleeping and a low wooden stool if you are lucky. Privacy is a word that does not exist in your dictionary, as all family members live, sleep, and eat in one room, sharing it with the smoke rising from the chimneyless cooking stove. This house is your humble fortress against the heat of the day, the cold of the night, and the hordes of insects that also consider it their home. It is breakfast time, the most important and least lavish meal of your day. Forget about fancy dishes. Breakfast here is not a festive event, but rather a tactical supply operation to stay alive. The mainstay of your meal is bread, lots of it. A dense, coarse-textured bread that requires as much effort to chew as a piece of leather. And do not be surprised if you find some sand in your bite. It is not an intentional addition, but an uninvited ingredient that comes from the grinding stones, which explains why the Egyptians' teeth were completely worn down by middle age. Imagine the pain of an abscess in your molar without a dentist and without painkillers, except to wait until the tooth falls out on its own or the infection takes your life. Then comes the wine. But do not get too excited. It is not the drink you know, but a thick, cloudy, and lukewarm liquid. More like a brain porridge than a refreshing drink. Even children drank it, not as a luxury, but because it was safer than the water of the Nile. As for lunch and dinner, they are often just a repetition of breakfast. If you are lucky, you might get an onion or a small fish. Breakfast in ancient Egypt was not for flavor, but for function. It gives your body the minimum amount of energy to last until the next sand-filled piece of bread. Enjoy your meal. Now that you have got your fuel, it is time for work. And believe me, the misery of work in ancient Egypt makes the fatigue of modern jobs seem like a day at a spa. If you were not a scribe or a priest, which you most likely would not be, your job is a combination of muscles and dust. If you were a farmer, you would spend your day with your feet sunk in the Nile mud, pulling weeds and planting barley under the watchful eye of a supervisor whose favorite hobby seems to be screaming and waving his stick. But if you were a laborer, it becomes more epic. Imagine yourself dragging stones weighing tons to build a temple, barefoot, under a scorching sun, on ramps made of gravel and prayer. If you stumbled, you would only get a broken shoulder and a look of indifference from the foreman. And if you got sick, you would turn to the doctor of that era, who combined limited science with absolute magic. He might prescribe a bandage of honey and moldy bread, which might work thanks to their antibacterial properties. But he might also prescribe a mixture of crocodile dung and lizard blood, accompanied by a spell to ward off the evil spirits believed to be the cause of your illness. Medicine was a gamble. Your chance of recovery was no greater than the chance of your condition worsening. Freedom, as you know it today, did not exist. You were born into your class, and you would most likely die in it. Your life, your work, and even your marriage were determined by your social status. You belonged to the pharaoh, just like the land you worked on. And justice? It was swift and harsh. If you were accused of theft, even stealing a loaf of bread to feed your family, the punishment could be 100 lashes, physical mutilation, or even being sent to forced labor in the mines, which was a slow death sentence. There was no second chance. There was no room for error. The system that built the pyramids was not built on the dreams of individuals, but on their absolute obedience and submission. You were just a small stone in a huge and sacred edifice. And now, after a day of heat, hunger, sand, superstitions, and hard labor, it is time to ask the fundamental question: would you have really survived in ancient Egypt? Let's be honest, most likely, no. It is easy to romanticize the ancient world, but behind its timeless monuments and amazing arts, there was a world of harsh realities that spared no one but the elite. Your average Egyptian day began on an earth floor surrounded by a cloud of flies and built on the certainty that if you did not work, you would not eat. You walked barefoot on burning sand and lived side by side with insects, smoke, and livestock. You had no toothpaste, no medicine, and no retirement plan. And despite all this, the ancient Egyptians were not miserable. They believed deeply in their gods, their purpose, and the beauty of life. They loved music, dance, food, and celebrations. They painted, sculpted, and imagined eternity with a clarity that enabled them to build stone structures that are still standing to this day. They found meaning in their suffering, order in the chaos of their lives, and immortality in the face of their mortality. So no, you probably would not have survived a single day. But that is okay, because they survived for thousands of years. And perhaps that is why we are still talking about them to this day.